question here, and it's Shaedon from BC, and she asks, upon arrival in Canada after an international flight, why are travelers still required to quarantine 2 weeks, even if they complete rapid testing for COVID-19? Now, you can get a kick of that, but I'd like to add my 2 bits worth as well.
Well, and probably my answer wouldn't be any better and probably nowhere near as good as Dr. Hedy Fry's. And so I'll defer to you on this, except I would also say we do a lot of screening, but for everybody who enters this country from international borders, either the U.S. or anywhere else, we have found, and we're working really closely with public health officials in British Columbia, across the country, and with our federal public health agency of Canada. And we believe quarantine has been incredibly effective in helping keep people safe. I know it's inconvenient, but quite frankly, inconvenience balanced against the lives of Canadians is a pretty simple equation for me. I would also point out that a negative result on a rapid test, if the person is not far along in their exposure or in the onset of the illness, it's very easy in the first 4 or 5 days of exposure to produce a negative result. And it isn't really until they become more symptomatic that we get positive results. And so a negative result is not sufficient protection, in my opinion, to ensure that people wouldn't represent a risk coming into Canada. And that's why we've imposed the quarantine restriction. I think it's impactful, but it's still the right thing to do.
Actually, you got that right. I think the rapid testing does have some faults and some flaws, and they can produce a lot of false negatives. They can also produce a lot of false positives. And I think the 14-day quarantine is an important thing, because what we do know is that if you contracted the virus, it doesn't show up within the first 4 days. It takes 4th day to the 14th day for you to test positive for the virus and for you to begin to show symptoms. We also know that there are many people who are asymptomatic. They can carry the virus, but they don't test. And so we need to test everyone, and we need to ensure that. The problem, of course, is that one of the things that is difficult is that at the other end, if you're coming from, let us say, England, and you are asked only one question as you get on the plane in England, and that is, are you sick? Do you have a fever? And your fever is tested. And have you been in contact? People who desperately want to come and visit their family or do whatever would say, no, I'm feeling great. I'm feeling great. And then you discover afterwards that people were on that flight who eventually tested positive. It's also one very good thing that I'm sad to say we're not doing here in British Columbia, and that is the app, the tracking app that the federal government brought forward, that every single province in Canada has accepted that app and is using that app, except for British Columbia and Alberta. But it can track people who may have tested, who may not know they have, and who may have, after they've entered and are in quarantine, may have found out, or anyone. It's a very private app. It doesn't give names. It doesn't tell anything. It just lets people know that they may have been in contact with someone who tested positive for COVID-19. So perhaps they should go get tested, get checked, watch for symptoms, etc. And we don't have it here in BC, and that's kind of sad, because it treats British Columbians very differently from the rest of the country. And of course, I'm not thrilled about that as a physician, I'll tell you.
And just let me add a couple of things, if I may. I'm from Ontario, and I do use the app. I downloaded it on the very first day. I'm glad to have it. It makes me feel a little more secure. Secondly, we have an Arrive Can app for people who are flying into the country. It's a digital collection of information that facilitates contact tracing. We're going to make it mandatory effective November 20th, so that's something that's coming. So we'll have a lot more. The digital collection of that information enables us to share it with provincial health authorities in the region or in the province, which is really, really helpful. And finally, one of the things that we're looking at, we're starting today actually in Alberta, for people who fly in on international flights, and it's a series of testing that may allow us to truncate the 14-day period. And so if you have a test upon arrival, and then another test on day 5 or day 7, and they're both negative, that may provide us with adequate evidence that individual is clear. And if they are clear, then they don't have to complete the rest of the 14-day So we're trying to find a way to manage that quarantine period by adding testing as another element that'll give us enough information to do it safely. It's in pilot. I think there's lots of things we have to learn. I don't want to make any presumptions about how that'll turn out, but we're constantly looking for ways in which we can manage this better for Canadians.
Yes. And at the end of the day, it's about protecting Canadians.